Hi, Sam.
How's it going?
Who are we waiting on now?
Yeah.
There's Peter.
Good evening, everybody. Before I call this meeting to order, and while we're getting folks together, I want to do something purely social and personal. As you may remember, around the holiday season, we often have a sort of potluck dinner for members of the council and significant other, and for the staff people who've worked with us on a regular basis, which would include the town manager, the finance director, and the town clerk. Tasha, I would assume, and also Margaret, if she is interested. So I've talked with a couple of people. We're looking at some tentative dates. The dates would be, just wait 1 second, we were talking about Friday, December 10th at my house, and no politics or council business is allowed, so that we conform with the FOI. It is a purely social event. I will provide a main dish, and then I will solicit contributions from the rest of you for hors d'oeuvres, salads, vegetables, desserts, wine, whatever people care to bring. I will say that I have one rule in my personal household, and that is that since if we are sitting down to eat together, I do require that people be vaccinated. There are people in my family who may or may not have been eligible, and that's true also for other people around us. And I also really don't want to let anybody, even who has been vaccinated, be subject to any kind of safety. And since we're going to be eating and talking in fairly closed spaces, it's truly important. So if the 10th works for everybody, that would be great. It's a Friday night. We would do this pretty informally. I think the number of people invited has grown. We may have to spread out around my house a little bit more than simply squeezing into the dining room table, which would be even elbow to elbow is kind. I think it's almost lap to lap, given the number of people we're talking about. So we'll have to figure out a slight variation on my standard thing. But anyway, it is social, and it's always a very lovely evening. So I really hope everybody can come, and I'll follow up later in the month with details. Sarah Ann, are you there?
I sure am.
Okay, I have a question before we call this all to order. Normally we stand and raise our right hands. Is standing required?
No, standing is not required.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, then. I'm going to call
recording in progress.
This is the first meeting of the Mansfield Town Council following the election of November 2021. The subject of this meeting is organizational, and while I have called this meeting to order, it is the town clerk who is officially required, since I no longer have any standing whatsoever. Sarah Ann, I turn it over to you to start.
Okay, thank you. And just to be technical, we actually are not beginning our technical meeting yet, so this will not be in the minutes. First, could I have anyone who's not a council member, looks like just Ryan, please turn off your video. We're hoping to get a nice screenshot photo of you all being sworn in. So,
Right. If my cat walks across in front of me, please don't take the picture. And I think Ben is nodding the same thing.
I think we'll have plenty of video to work with. Don't worry about it. All right. So if we could please have you all raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or solemnly and sincerely affirm, as the case may be, that you will faithfully discharge, according to law, your duties as town councilor to the best of your abilities, so help you God, or upon penalty of perjury? And a nod to the
Yeah.
affirmative will do it. Wonderful. Thank you and congratulations. And we'll call the meeting to order. We have about another 9 minutes to wait.
Does anybody have any problem with our social holiday gathering on December 10th while we're still talking?
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. If I sort of missed that, Tony. So December 10th?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll take a look. Alrighty. Okay.
What the fuck is calling me? Hello? 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 Oh, okay.
Should I please mute?
How come I can't get in there?
There you go. Okay. Now, are we still going with a motion to table?
Tony, mute.
Hello?
Hi, welcome, George. This is Town Clerk Sarah Ann Chain. We are waiting until 7 p.m. to officially begin the meeting.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes, you're welcome. If you're able to go ahead and mute yourself.
I should mute myself?
Yes, yeah, we're all muted at the moment. Are you on the computer or on the phone, George?
On the phone.
Okay. We might need, I'm not sure if you're able, how one does that being on the phone. If Tasha or Ryan are able to hear me, you might need to manually mute George.
Yeah, I think I do.
Okay. There we go, George. You're muted now. Thank you.
I did that. I
That's
think
okay.
he may have been speaking.
Yes,
Sorry.
I'm assuming he can hear me, so we should be all
Okay.
right. Thank you, George. Thank you, Tasha.
Sarah Ann,
Okay, yes,
7 o'clock.
yes, that is, thank you. All right, everyone, this is Town Clerk Sarah Ann Chain. I'm calling the meeting of the Town Council November 8th, 2021 to order at 7 p.m. We'll start with a roll call. Osberger.
Here.
Berthelot.
Here.
Bruder.
Here.
Frattoni.
Here.
Kotchenberger.
Here.
Moran.
Here,
Shuren.
Here.
Shaken.
Here.
Thank you. First order of organizational business is the election of a mayor and a deputy mayor. I will now entertain nominations for mayor. Yes, Mr. Shaken.
Hi, good evening and welcome back, everyone. It's good to see you all. I am virtually rising to place Tony Moran's name into nomination for a second term as mayor.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you. Tony Moran has been nominated as mayor. Are there any other nominations? Okay, hearing none. All in favor of Tony Moran? Yes,
I was hoping to comment briefly, if you don't mind.
certainly. Go right ahead.
Just briefly to say, I guess I should have done this while making my nomination. But Tony has served us very well in her first term as mayor, very much including stepping up to the plate during a pandemic to help John as interim manager at the beginning and the rest of the staff deal with truly unprecedented times. Definitely not what Tony was expecting when she stepped into this role, but she rose to the occasion, and I think she has earned all of our support. She should have earned all of our support for a second term as mayor.
Okay, thank you. At this time, all in favor of Tony Moran for mayor, please signify by raising your hand. Okay, that looks unanimous. Wonderful, thank you. Mayor Moran, congratulations. You now have the floor.
thank you. And thank you very much, all of you, for your support and tonight, but certainly for the past 2 years. It's been, as you can imagine, an interesting time in more ways than one. The pandemic was only part of it. And I am really delighted to accept the role for the next 2 years. One of my goals for the next 2 years is to attend the ribbon cutting for the new school. I always said that I wasn't going to leave the council until I could do that, so it really looks like it's going to happen, so I'm delighted. The next item of business is the nomination for deputy mayor. Are there any nominations? Peter?
I would like to nominate Ben Shaken, and I will make, I guess, the comment now. Ben has joined the council in 2015. We elected him, and that was good judgment on our part. We elected him deputy mayor in just 2019. And like the mayor did, within 3 to 4 months of a new council, in order, the pandemic hit. And while it's sometimes maybe a cliche to say people rise or not to these challenges, I think they really do. And we see a lot about people and their leadership ability and character. And both Ben and Tony certainly rose to those challenges. So it's a pleasure to recommend or to move Ben's nomination as deputy mayor.
Can I make a comment on this? I'm going to rule myself eligible to make this comment, and that is there couldn't have been a better partner. And I have really appreciated Ben's work, all of it, both politically and as a council member. So, are there any other nominations?
You need a second, Mayor.
Mr. Bruder seconds. All those in favor of Ben Shaken's role as deputy mayor, please raise your hand. Looks unanimous again. Thank you, one and all. And thank you, Ben, again, for all the work you've done and all your help. The next item on the agenda is the Town Council Rules of Procedure. There is a motion on page 9. Here we go. And Ben.
I'm going to make the motion, be it resolved that under the authority of section C302 of the town charter, the town council of the town of Mansfield does hereby adopted as its rules of procedure, the town of Mansfield Town Council Rules of Procedure dated March 18th, 2020. These rules are in effect for the term of office of the town council or until revised and shall be adopted by the town council at the organizational meeting. Procedural matters not covered in the town charter or these rules of procedure will be determined by the mayor or by the deputy mayor in the absence of the mayor in accordance with Robert's Rules of Order newly revised, and further move effective today to refer the council rules of procedure to the town council personnel committee.
Is there a second to Ben's motion? Terry seconds. Ben, do you want to speak to your motion?
Only to say this has been our custom that we obviously have to adopt rules on our first organizational meeting, but that every 2 years the personnel committee takes a look at them to make sure that there aren't things that need to be adjusted. This is a slightly exceptional situation in that we have made a number of adjustments over the last 2 years to our rules to accommodate the various different COVID protocols. And so I don't know that the personnel committee will come back with substantial changes, but nonetheless, it's a good idea to take a look at them every 2 years. And so, so that's what we're asking them to do.
Any further comments on rules of procedure? I will make one comment, and that is that it is my intention to be fairly strict in applying the Robert's rules and our own rules of procedure. I am contemplating somewhat relaxed conduct of the meeting, but I'm not entirely sure how that should go. But the rules for order of discussion and order of debate and all of that sort of thing, I don't believe should be changed right now. So we will proceed. Are we ready for a vote on the rules of procedure? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Unanimous. The rules of procedure have been adopted. Thank you. The next item on the agenda is the motion for the meetings of the town council. There is a motion on the page following the rules.
19.
There we go. And there are three resolutions. I think they can be made together. Who would like to make these? Ron, go ahead.
I move to adopt the following resolutions. Resolved, pursuant to section C302 of the town charter, the town council shall meet regularly on the second and fourth Mondays of every month, with the exception of certain holidays when meeting is pushed to a Tuesday or Wednesday at 7 p.m. in the council chambers of the Audrey P. Beck building. The schedule of meetings for 2022, as provided by the town clerk, is hereby approved. So let us take that, and then the next resolution, we'll take them all together.
Yes, please.
Resolved pursuant to section C302 of the town charter, the town council shall provide methods for the calling of special meetings. Special meetings of the town council may be called by the mayor or on the written request of at least 3 members of the council, filed with the offices of the town manager and town clerk not less than 36 hours, excluding Saturday, Sunday, legal holidays, and any day on which the office of the town clerk is officially closed, in advance of such meeting, which request must specify the date and time and business to be transacted, and copies of this notice shall be served by mail or personally upon each council member and the town manager, or left at their usual place of abode at least 24 hours prior thereto. Next, resolved, emergency special meetings may be called by the mayor or the town manager in case of an emergency with at least 2 hours notice given to the council members without complying with the posting of notice requirement, but a copy of the meetings of every such emergency special meeting shall be filed with the town clerk not later than 72 hours following the holding of such meeting in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act, Connecticut General Statute, Section 1-225D.
Is there a second to Ron's motion? Charlie seconds. Would you like to speak to your motion, Ron?
Yes, this is consistent with our current procedure. I understand that the town staff has looked at the dates of meetings to assure that they don't conflict with holidays or other religious holidays and so forth. For the rest, it is consistent with the procedure that we have been undertaking for the past few years.
Are there any comments on the calendar? Are we ready to vote? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Looks to me like it's unanimous. Thank you very much. The meeting schedule has been adopted. The next item is filling an existing town council vacancy. As we are all aware, we have lost a valued member of the council in David Freudman's death in October. There was not a candidate on the ballot to fill his seat, and so it is left to us to fill this vacancy. Because it is a vacancy for David's seat, we have asked the Republican Town Committee to bring forth the nomination. Mr. Osberger.
Mayor, I would like to move that we table this until further review.
All right, a motion to table is not debatable. All those needs a second. Is there a second to Mr. Osberg? Mr. Shaken, you second? Mr. Fertoni seconds. Mr. Fertoni seconds. All right. All those in favor of the motion to table, please raise your hand. Thank you. Once again, it's unanimous. All right, then the next item on our agenda is appointments to standing council committees. What I'm going to do is to ask members of the council who have an interest in remaining on the committees they're on or being placed in a different one to let me know in advance. At the moment, Peter wishes to remain as chair of finance and Ben wishes to remain on the committee. We need a third council member. Ron has agreed to chair personnel and Terry wishes to remain on that committee. Sam wishes to continue to chair the committee on committees and Terry wishes to remain on there, but I have not had a chance to speak to our Republican members. Mr. Fertoni, would you stay on finance?
Sure.
And Mr. Osberger, would you stay on committee on committees?
Yes, that's fine.
Do you have either of you have any other requests? We still have a vacancy on personnel.
I think once we resolve our other issue, that will be coming resolved.
Okay. So those are the council committees. So we have only one vacancy. We can put forth a motion that nominates, the appointments are by the council. They're not by me. So that's my recommendation. But the council needs to have a motion to appoint these people to these committees. Would somebody like to make that motion? Or do you want to wait till next meeting when we have other candidates?
Point of clarification, Mayor. One of your sole powers as mayor is to make the appointments to the standing council committees. It's not up to the...
I checked the charter, and the charter says these committees are appointed by the council.
Okay. Okay.
There may be others where I can do it myself, but the standing committees are appointed by the council. So do it now or wait until we have the remaining members. Ben? No, Ron?
No, just a small point. If we don't do it now, can the committees transact their business?
No, not until they're. not formally.
Yeah.
So do you want to appoint the people we know to the committees and have vacancies?
I think that would be better.
Okay. Who would like to make this motion? Terry? You're muted.
I can, though. Before I do, I was just going to ask whether there were any, are there any meetings scheduled between now and our next?
Yeah, this week.
Okay. Then I will make the motion.
Okay. Do you need reminders of who is who, or do you?
You need
know
all the
it?
names? Can
Yeah.
Yeah. This is going to be messy.
I'll tell you what, Sarah Ann, let me read the list as we have it so you have it, and then Terry can make her motion and we'll figure it out. So for finance, it's Peter as chair and Ben on the committee. For personnel, it's Ron as chair and Terry on the committee.
For finance, would Al?
For finance, also Al on the committee. I'm sorry, I missed my note. For personnel, it's Terry and Ron, with Ron as chair. And for committee on committees, Sam is chair, Terry is there, and so is Charlie.
So I'll move that.
And Sam seconds. Any further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. All right, it's unanimous. Okay, the next one is appointment of council representatives to advisory committees. Sarah Ann has given us a list of advisory committees and where there are vacancies and where there are current council members. I don't think we can conclude this discussion tonight, but I will ask for what you want to do at our next meeting. So is that okay with everybody? All right, and the next item on our agenda is the appointment of a town attorney, Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologize. The information that was included in the packet, this is falls in the category of upon further review. We may need to take a slightly different tack. So as you all know, last year, the contract for services with the town's existing law firm and attorney Kevin Deneen in particular, who has been representing the town, was extended through December 13th, 2021. That would be the council's first meeting in December. And the issue at hand is, per the town's charter, a new town attorney needs to be appointed within 30 days of the local office elections, which obviously puts us at December 2nd. In consulting with Attorney Deneen in this case, he informed me today that even though there's a contract in place that extends through December 13th, it will be necessary for the council to take action on an appointment of a town attorney. Less will be without one as of December 2nd. So the council basically either has to take action on this tonight or the next meeting this month. I am just now putting into the chat, and I'm adapting this sort of on the fly, an alternative motion that could be used for that purpose.
All right, in the chat we have
Out loud.
the motion. Mr. Shaken.
I move to appoint the firm of O'Malley, Deneen, Leary, Messina, and Oswecki as the town attorney to continue to serve under the terms contained in the most recently executed contract extension, which has a term expiring December 13th, 2021. This appointment will continue through December 31st, 2021.
There's a second. Seconded by Mr. Bruder. Would you like to speak to your motion, Mr. Shaken?
Yes, a number of years ago, I believe the year before I joined the council decided to officially sort of procure the services of town attorneys rather than the way they are treated in state statute, which is a pure political appointment by the council. Kevin's firm was hired. Kevin was hired then, and we have gone out to bid, as Ryan said, this year as part of our sort of standard procurement procedure. The personnel committee will be in possession of the responses to that request for proposals and will make a recommendation to us for the appointment of our full term in short order, either at our next meeting or at our first meeting in December, depending on their schedule. And at that point, we will either reappoint Kevin's firm if they are selected, if they've applied, or appoint a new town attorney, depending on the process. But as Ryan said, we are required by statute to make that political appointment, nevertheless, on or around our first meeting. And so I would like to make it tonight.
Mr. Osberger.
Oh, Ben just answered my question at the tail end of his discussion there. I had thought there was a typo and then didn't understand how we have to reappoint our town attorney for the consecutive year.
And to be clear, because I know it might even look like a typo because there's the 13th and the 31st. The 31st is intentional. In the event that there was a transition to a new firm, it also allows for time for that transition to take place. So the intention was to have this appointment continue through the end of December.
Oh, no, Ryan, I meant if it was supposed to read December 31st, 2022.
Okay.
But Ben answered my question.
Okay, any further questions on the reappointment? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. Mr. Deneen is reappointed at least until the end of December. Okay, now, next item on the agenda is the approval of the minutes. But before we move on to the regular part of our council meeting, I want to add something that I wanted to do at the very beginning of this meeting. Mansfield has lost one of its most valued and wonderful citizens in the past week in the death of Eileen Ossen. Ms. Ossen was the chief, the president of the Jeffrey P. Ossen Foundation, and under her leadership, she steered the foundation into making very, very substantial contributions to the quality of life in Mansfield, from the playground to the stage on the square, to significant contributions for women and girls, just a very wide range of engagement and support for Mansfield over the past at least decade. So she was also a very wonderful person. She faced the immense challenges of the loss of her twin sister to the disease that she suffered and ultimately died from, and also her own challenges with this disease. She was brave, she was funny, she was fully engaged, and we are really going to miss her in this community. So I'd just like to take this moment for a moment of silence in memory of Eileen Ossen. Okay, thank you. Now on to the much more mundane issues. We have a set of minutes to be approved. The minutes from October 25th, 2021. Is there a motion to approve these minutes? Ms. Berthelot. Ms. Berthelot moves. Is there a second? Mr. Osberger seconds. I'm so used to using last names, I can't go back to first names. I'm just going to keep on going. Is there anybody who has any comments, corrections, changes? All those in favor, please raise your hand. Mr. Bruder, are you not in favor?
Abstaining, I wasn't here.
Oh, okay. All in favor except for Mr. Bruder, who is abstaining. Thank you. The minutes have been approved. Now, we have a public hearing scheduled for this evening. Ms. Jane, would you please read the call to the public hearing?
Yes, the Mansfield Town Council will hold a public hearing at 7 p.m. at its regular meeting on November 8th, 2021, to solicit public comment regarding the proposed Mansfield Affordable Housing Trust Fund ordinance. At this hearing, persons may address the Town Council and written communications may be received. Information regarding the proposed ordinance is on file and available at the Town Clerk's office, 4 South Eagleville Road, Mansfield, and is posted on the town's website, mansfieldct.gov. Dated at Mansfield, Connecticut, this 27th day of October, 2021.
Mr. Aylesworth, is there anybody who wishes to present testimony at this public hearing?
We received written testimony from a Sheila B. Amder, 49 Separatist Road. I believe this is the only public comment we received, and I'll read it into the record. This is addressed to the members of the Mansfield Town Council. May I first extend my thanks to the Town Council for its work to date on addressing the serious and urgent issue of affordable housing in our community. It is especially an urgent problem given the competition for scarce resources from UConn undergraduate and graduate students with people and families of limited income in our community. The trust fund will allow the town to designate specific sources of funding, such as fees from developers, to be deposited into the fund and to be used to support the development of affordable housing. In any town in the state, the development of affordable housing that is affordable to people with less than 80% of the median income, and particularly to those with less than 50% of the median income, is very difficult to bring to fruition. Multiple sources of funding are required from state and or federal grants, and local funds are also necessary to offset the development costs. The Housing Trust Fund will over time be able to provide some of the bridge funding to allow us to increase our stock of affordable housing for all our residents. I urge you to establish the Housing Trust Fund this evening. As funds are received by the Housing Trust Fund, I would also suggest that their use be directed to provide the bridge funding needed for projects that are underway. With Mansfield's supply of affordable housing so limited, we are long overdue in addressing these fundamental needs for decent affordable housing in our community.
Thank you. Is there anybody else who has requested permission to testify? Nope, then I will declare the hearing closed. Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the opportunity for the public to address the council. Is there anybody here from the public who wishes to address the council on any other matter?
I'm not aware of any members of the public, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. All right, then the next item, Mr. Aylesworth, is your report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The 4th and 5th editions of the inaugural cohort of the Mansfield Local Government Academy took place on October 28th and November 4th. Those topics covered planning and economic development, as well as public health, inspection services, and emergency management. Both of those sessions were as well received as the first 3. The program continues to build momentum. Very excited about that. And we have our next session coming up on November 18th at the Mansfield Public Library. And obviously we'll be talking about library services at that meeting. And I just want to, again, thank publicly all the department heads that are participating in that program. It's always rewarding to have an idea and have an idea actually take shape and have it play out the way you envisioned it. And knock on wood, we're halfway through this program and it seems on that trajectory. So I'm very excited about that. And of course, it wouldn't be playing out as well as it is if it wasn't for the preparation and competence on display of all our department heads in each of those sessions. So, so thanks to my team for that. You can mark your calendars for the second meeting this month for a presentation or series of recommendations that I plan to present to the council relative to uses of American Rescue Plan dollars. This is very much like a game of Tetris. It's not easy. And every day with some emerging new information, things get rejiggered a little bit and requires me to go back and see how all these pieces are fitting together. But I know Councilmember Berthelot asked about about this. I mentioned in my last report, but I just want to make sure to point out that that is my plan to provide some formal recommendations to you all later this month on that particular front. Via email, and hopefully people are driving around and seeing these as well, but via email, I shared some images with you all of the new gateway signs that are kind of the bookends of 195 in our town. So one sign at the intersection of Route 32 and 195, and the other basically down by Champagne Motors on 195 in the south end of town. Feedback continues to be positive. People seem very happy with how the signs have turned out. And, this is going to be part of a larger strategy that we're deploying right now as far as signage and wayfinding in our community. Council, I think, is also aware that we recently issued an RFP for wayfinding signage, and we have just finished up the process of reviewing proposals on that front. So just trying to make it that much easier for residents and visitors to our community to know where they're going and know when they're entering and exiting the town of Mansfield. So hopefully everybody's pleased with how that those gateway signs have turned out. This past Friday, myself, Mayor Moran, and Councilor Bruder participated in the annual dinner and recognition awards banquet for the Mansfield Fire Department. I thought it was a great event. It was actually the first time, I believe, that they've held this event off-site. Often it's held in the fire station or one of the fire stations, but it's good to go to a venue that's really set up for this sort of annual event. And there were a lot of remarks shared. There was a sort of a digital keynote address that was given, and then a series of service recognition awards and new firefighter of the year and firefighter of the year. And I'm happy to report that the firefighter of the year, as selected by the members of the fire department, was Assistant Chief Andrew Franklin. And he, of course, served as our interim chief after Chief Raiola left and before Chief Mitchell came on board. He served very admirably in that role, which coincided with the pandemic, but also with the budget season. And I think he was very surprised by the honor, but I was happy to be there and see him accept it. It was a very nice evening. I also want to note, I know it's somewhat old news now, but on October 28th, we had a very successful event honoring Connecticut's Teacher of the Year. Kim King was honored at Southeast Elementary School. There were a number of dignitaries at the state level and our state elected legislators as well. Governor Lamont was among the individuals that took part in the event. And in addition to honoring Miss King and her tremendous honor, which of course speaks very, very highly of the quality of the teachers in our public school system, we also had the opportunity to take advantage of the governor being on site to show him progress on the new elementary school, show him the foundations that were going into place and the structural steel that was being erected. And it sounds like the governor is very excited about coming and seeing the state's first net zero public elementary school open its doors next fall. So very enjoyable event. And again, just I think a real great day for the town of Mansfield. This is more of a public announcement than anything, but we want to make sure that everybody's aware that with the FDA's recent authorization of the Pfizer vaccine for children ages 5 to 11, there are now opportunities for some of the youngest amongst us in that age group to get vaccinated, get their first dose. And actually, there's a vaccination clinic being held at Mansfield Middle School. I believe it's 3 p.m. to 8 p.m. This coming Friday, November 12th. And families can pre-register through VAMS, and we strongly encourage people to go and do that and take advantage of some vaccination opportunities so convenient here in our community. We also want to make sure that our residents continue to be aware of our Helping Hands program, and that the town continues to accept applications for assistance with food and child care needs from residents impacted by the pandemic. And as a reminder, this is a program that's being funded with a grant through the Small Cities program. Please contact the Planning Department, 860-429-3330, or visit our website for more information. The mayor and I had a chance to take part in the annual Veterans Day luncheon last Friday at the Mansfield Senior Center. The format was, again, this year a little bit different because of the pandemic. It was a drive-through meals program, but there were, I believe, 125 veterans and their families that participated. The mayor and I were on greeter duty, and so we had a chance to chat with folks as they kind of stacked up in the parking lot in line in their cars and help them kill some time while they waited on a delicious roast beef lunch. I didn't get to sample any of the fare myself, but the smell was fantastic. So I'm sure if it tasted half as good as it smelled, it must have been pretty good food. On Halloween and the day before Halloween, we had some very successful community events. I just want to highlight, I want to do a shout out to the Mansfield Downtown Partnership for organizing a very successful trick-or-treat event with the businesses in the downtown stores area. Saturday, the 30th, was not the best weather. Speaking for some kids in the Aylesworth family, they were quite waterlogged, but a good time was had by all. And then the next day, the actual Halloween itself, the trunk-or-treat event or trick-or-trunk event at the community center was a banner year, enormously well attended, and trick-or-treating that carried on into the neighborhoods in the evening. It seemed to be a banner year. So some great Halloween festivities. And with the 9th annual winter welcome just around the corner here on December 4th, a lot of really good seasonal celebrations taking place in Mansfield right now. I want to let our residents know that the public library is going through a strategic planning process, and they are soliciting participation in focus groups to help us guide the future of the library, help us understand how our residents are currently using library services, and help us understand if there are additional services and programs that they want us to offer that maybe we aren't currently offering. And we have a focus group coming up on November 16th. That's at 7 p.m. That's a Tuesday. And then another one on Saturday, November 20th at 3 p.m. as well. And if you're interested in attending either of those focus groups, please reach out to Mansfield Library at mansfieldct.org. And I think in the interest of time, I'm going to stop it right there. And a number of the items in my written report will be touching on in later tonight in the agenda.
Thank you. Any questions for the town manager? None? Going. I'm going to let Ryan off the hook early tonight. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Aylesworth. There is no consent agenda. Oh, sorry, the next thing is reports and comments of town council members. I will start by saying all of us owe a great deal of thanks to those members of the public in Mansfield who came out and voted. It was a slightly lower turnout than normal, but those people who did vote exercised their civic duty. It's what it takes to be a real citizen. If you're going to believe in democracy, you've got to come out to vote. And all of us who are here tonight are deeply appreciative of the fact that people did come out to vote. As I said, it is always the right responsibility and one of the great joys of living in our community and in a democracy that we can exercise this right. Next, I want to say that, as Ryan said, we did shake hands at the Veterans Day lunch. It was a really pleasant event. I got a number of compliments on the quality of our senior center, which was very nice to hear. Several people made a special effort to make sure we understood that. We were blessed with a beautiful day, so standing out was not quite like, not as cold as election day cold standing, and so it was a lot pleasanter to do. But also the people were really great to talk to. One of the things I've decided is that we tend to talk about veterans as the people who charged into battle, but there were an awful lot of other people who make it possible for that to happen. You know, there's that old saying that the Army runs on its stomach. Well, if it doesn't have cooks and food service and laundry and delivery, not to mention the people who drive trucks into dangerous zones, but the people who make sure that the bases have food, water, and cleaning supplies, all of the other things that are necessary to put a large body of people into work, dangerous work. If we didn't have the people behind them, the wars would not be fought and would not be won. So we need to really give thanks to all of the people who joined, and no matter what the job was that they did. And I do want to say about the firefighters banquet, it is always a pleasure to be there. Firefighters are extremely important in our community. The majority of the work they do is responding to EMS, emergency medical service calls, and they are literal lifesavers on a day-to-day basis. So it's really a good opportunity to honor them. I must say that the banquet tastes much better in a fancy dining room than it does in the hall next to the Eagleville Firehouse. I don't know exactly why that is, but it was a really nice spread, and it was a pleasure to be there. Okay, any other council members have comments? Mr. Bruder.
I just also reiterate thanks to Chief Mitchell. You know, it was great to be able to talk to his wife and the firefighters who invited us. But also, I just wanted to say thank you to all the election people, both town staff and the volunteers. You know, as somebody who came out to vote, it's very nice to see everything run as smoothly. You know, if there were hiccups, I wasn't aware of them, and I was traveling around. So just wanted to reiterate a thanks to them.
I'd like to echo that. You know, I stayed late to get the final counts, and one of the things that is truly amazing is the bipartisan goodwill that the people who work the polls show. Everybody collaborates, works well together, follows the rules, helps one another, and they do it with laughter and good cheer, no matter whether they've been there from 5 in the morning until 10 at night or not. So it really is a pleasure to watch that. Anybody else? Mr. Bruder? No? Okay.
Nothing more. Thank you.
All right. Okay, then we'll move on to old business, the Martin Luther King agenda mural update. Mr. Aylesworth, I think you're going to call on Mr. Matoma.
I am. So I invited Glenn to come to the council to give everybody an update on the project and a little bit of information on the upcoming community celebration and the grand unveiling that's happening this Saturday. Before I do, I just want to say on a personal note how much, you know, I have deeply appreciated and been amazed by the amount of time and effort and collaboration that's gone into this, not just, you know, within the walls, you know, of Town Hall, but all the external interest and support and community involvement in the project. And so I think this is really shaping up to be something exceptional for our community. I think the art itself looks great on the side of the community building, and looking forward to seeing what's in store on Saturday. But Glenn, the floor is yours.
Great. Thanks, Ryan, and thanks, Madam Mayor. Congratulations to you and the other members of the council on your reelection, and looking forward to working with you on behalf of the Human Rights Commission going forward. And as Ryan said, there's lots of thanks. We're on the cusp of completion and then the unveiling. I think the last time I checked in with you all, we had just completed the paint day, which several of you participated in. Again, thank you for that. And since that time, we're kind of wrapping things up. We pursued the successful completion of the fundraising initiative. We raised over $5,000 from the public, which was matched by $5,000 from Sustainable CTs, and then also $5,000 from you, the town, along with Region 19 and Mansfield Public Schools. So thank you for your financial support as well in making this possible. And it's all gone to great effect. You may have noticed if you were in and out of Town Hall that there is some activity on the south facade of the community center. But don't look too closely because it's not unveiled yet. So it's still a secret. So avert your eyes next time. Only know that that something really terrific is coming. So we're really excited. Amita Roller, the artist, has been there putting on the finishing touches of this mural. Again, I think I shared last time, it was a collaborative design. She's hit upon a theme of a quilt, which we find really powerful for the message of knitting us together as a community in the service of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy of justice and human rights. And so we're really excited to be closing in on this event this coming Saturday. I do want to extend to all of you and everybody who might be watching an invitation to join us Saturday, the 13th, from 11 o'clock to 1 p.m. We'll have an exciting program, some singing, some music, some dance, some remarks, some reflection on what a mural like this means to our town, to our state, and hopefully a path forward. You know, in my estimation, this will probably be, you know, maybe the second most exciting human rights event in town this fall, but you know, we'll see how that goes. I'm really hopeful that we'll have beautiful weather. I know we'll have a tremendous turnout, and it's designed to be relaxing, community orienting, and hopefully give us a direction going forward. As Ryan said at the beginning, all of this was only possible because we had wonderful collaboration and support all across the town. And I do want to extend some special thanks to Ryan, and then to Margaret Chady in the town offices, as well as Bethany Colon and Jay O'Keefe in the community center, who've been absolutely fabulous in working through the logistics. Amita, of course, has been fantastic as an artist. People stopped by today and she had them pick up paintbrushes and engage, along with her Matt Conway from CT Murals, who's been just key to helping us stay on track and organize. He's doing heroic work setting up public art all across the state. Of course, we did this in collaboration with the Human Rights Commission with two of our community partners, the NAACP and CORE Mansfield. So Mia Matoma, my wife, gets special thanks as well, has been incredible. And Dr. Carlita Cotton has contributed significantly and will be an important part of our program. The schools, Larry Barlow was an active participant and made sure that we got real buy-in from all across the schools, but especially the middle school. Kim Bova, Judy McChesney, Ann Williams from the Arts Commission have also been really active participants in these conversations. And then we had a graduate student from UConn, Emily Burnett, who's been great in getting the students involved at UConn and making sure it really does reflect all of our towns. So as I said, we're really excited about where this is going. We hope this is the first of many public art initiatives and the first of many opportunities to engage all across the town in what I know are our shared values of human rights, justice, and dignity. So please, I hope you will join us on Saturday. Again, Margaret has promised it will be perfect weather. So, you know, what are you going to say? But even if it's not, we actually fortunately can pivot inside. So there will be a chance to see the mural outside, but then we can also go inside and not let the New England fall weather interrupt any festivities. So happy to take any questions, but again, mostly wanted to be here to invite you and express my appreciations for your support.
Questions regarding the mural? Ms. Berthelot?
First off, thank you, Glenn, for all of your leadership on this and for your presentation tonight. It's wonderful, and I know everybody greatly appreciates everything you're doing, and all the work of the Human Rights Commission and CORE and everybody else that you mentioned. I have to bite. Did you say this is the second most exciting thing that's happening? What's the first?
Sorry, I was being a little tongue in cheek about what happened last month on the 15th up at UConn. So
Gotcha. Also pretty big event, but thank you for that. And thank you for all your hard work.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Anybody else? All right. Well, thank you. Glenn, we didn't expect your commission to be quite as busy as it's been when we asked you to serve on it. I think we may have misrepresented to you exactly what was going to happen.
Yeah.
But we're delighted that you've taken on this responsibility and are doing it so well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate it, and I'm wise now to the bait and switch. So no, I'm happy to do it. It's a pleasure. So thank you so much.
Thank you. All right.
Town committees rely on bait and switch. That's how we all got here.
You can ask Sam about that on committees. He sets out the bait all the time. Okay, COVID. I see that Rob Miller is here. Welcome back.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Happy Monday, everybody. I don't have a lengthy report today, so I'll get right to the point. Just starting off with some surveillance information. Mansfield's transmission rate continues to be, as the DPH is calculating, below 5 cases per 100,000. So, and it's been that way now for a number of weeks. So that's good news. At the county level, Tallinn County is at 51 cases per 100,000 as of yesterday, as measured and calculated by the CDC. That places Tallinn County in the substantial level of transmission category. And just note the threshold is 50. So once we get down to 49, then it will be at the moderate level. And it appears to be trending in that direction. I will note that the CDC's figure for calculating transmission risk has been a bit volatile. It's been going up and down for the past couple of weeks. Tallinn County was at moderate, then it jumped up to high. Now it's back down to substantial and seems to be trending back down. I think the overall trend is a downward trend, but we'll have to see how the next few weeks goes as the weather gets colder and people continue to stay indoors. In terms of the health district population, we did see a slight uptick in the counts. We went from 22 cases 3 weeks ago to 2 weeks ago to 33 cases a week ago. Hopefully that increase does not continue. I think overall the past number of weeks we've really seen a plateauing within the health district population. Vaccine rates continue to increase incrementally each week. Every week, a number of additional people join the fully vaccinated family, and that's always welcome news, even though they're small increases. We're very excited with the recent extension of the authorization of Pfizer vaccine to kids 5 to 11. That should put a good dent in the segment of the population that's currently unvaccinated. Once we get some traction, some movement going in that area. As of last week, kids of that age group were officially eligible. For our part, the Eastern Highlands Health District has scheduled a series of clinics targeting 5 to 11 years old at a number of our schools. One of them, as Ryan pointed out earlier tonight, is Mansfield Middle School this Friday. So we hope to vaccinate up to 1,000 kids in that age group within the next couple of weeks. We'll see how that goes. Depending on how that goes, in terms of a long-term plan, pending the outcome of this initial mobilization of resources, we'll certainly continue to look at ways to make the vaccine accessible to that age group on a longer-term basis. And with that, I think I'll leave it right there.
Mr. Shaken.
Thanks, Mayor. And hi, Rob. Good to see you again.
Good to
Maybe
see you
we're
too.
moving to a time when you can be excused from your bi-weekly updates for a period of time again. That was a short-lived reprieve this summer for you.
No problem.
I have a question. First of all, just a statement. Thanks for the pediatric vaccine clinics. I don't know right now how booked you are at them, but for families who might be trying for an appointment and finding it difficult to get an Eastern Highlands District appointment at Mansfield Middle School on Friday, I just wanted to give a shout out to the Norwich Walmart, which seems to have a significant number of appointments available every day, and you can schedule them through Walmart's website. The 5-year-old, 6-year-old in our household managed to squeak in to MMS on Friday, but there were a plethora of appointments available kind of every day this week at the Walmart in Norwich. And I know some of the other providers are getting up online, like Hartford Healthcare and CVS and others, but they seem to be quickest to the draw of pediatric availability this week.
Yeah, we're currently in that roster of area providers continues to change. We're compiling an updated list now. We plan on pushing that out through the school systems to give parents every opportunities to highlight those opportunities out there in the region. Cool. I will take this opportunity to note that as of noon today, only about half of our appointments at the middle school had been filled, and overall, about half of the 50% of the appointments of our other clinics also. So, as of the middle of today, we still had plenty of appointments available, and anybody listening, they can go to vams.cdc.gov to book their appointment with Eastern Highlands Health District.
Thanks. And I had a advice question for you. We've gotten some questions, really only one of them from a constituent. We've gotten a number of questions from people who don't live in Mansfield, but who shop here, about our local mask mandate, which I know was sort of implemented by us when we were on vacation this summer, when the Delta variant really took off. But one of the things that we've, I think, sort of unofficially used as a metric for that is the transmission rates in Windham and Tallinn counties, being on the border of both those counties with people who shop here from both of those counties. Given that the CDC's numbers are changing, is there a time at which you feel like it would make sense for us to revisit that issue? I haven't seen as close statistical reporting from the state about booster shot uptake percentages from the population. And of course, that whole policy is somewhat of a mess right now. But I'm just curious, from a public health perspective, I know probably most of the towns in the district have not implemented mandates, or some of the towns have not implemented mandates and some have. And so while I think it's a good idea to have it, I do also agree that we need to be working towards some sort of commonly agreed upon metric, at which point we adjust our public health decisions. And so I'm curious what you think is an advisable metric.
Sure. So our position here at Eastern Highlands is very closely aligned with the CDC's recommendation, using their metric at the county level. And we use that metric because, as you've aptly pointed out, Mansfield has neighbors, and we need to be cognizant that we're a whole community altogether. And so it's been, and so with that said, as I reported earlier, Tallinn County, which is where Mansfield's located, is currently at substantial level of community transmission risk category. And the CDC's recommendation is any county substantial or high it's recommended that anybody indoor and public spaces wear masks regardless of vaccination status. I think that it's appropriate to consider using that metric moving forward, and at some point in time, hopefully sooner rather than later, Collin County will drop into the moderate level. Obviously there are considerations. It's not one situation fits all. There are other factors I think that are appropriate to consider. I think it's reasonable to consider that kind of the trigger to start to consider whether you want to lift a mandate or not. Other considerations certainly would be what's going on in Windham County and perhaps New London County. Also, I think I would definitely urge prudence once Collin County drops into the moderate transmission level, because, as I said earlier, CC updates that metric on a daily basis, so it tends to be a bit volatile. It goes up and down. I think it would be appropriate if the council chose to use that metric for this purpose, to let some time go by to assure that you've got some numbers that are relatively stable and reflect a lower risk within the population. In regards to that specifically, I know that a number of my colleagues in the Capital Region Council of Governments had put together a recommendation that 3 to 4 weeks of transmission rates in the low to moderate category, as calculated by the CDC, would be appropriate as a period of time, and then subsequent to that, consider lifting the mandate. Now, that being said, I know there are a number of cities and towns in Capital Region which have been following that recommendation by the local public health directors, but nonetheless, it's out there, and I think it's reasonable to consider letting some weeks go by with lower levels of transmission. And the reason for that is it's easier to ask people to take their masks off than it is to ask them to put them back on. So it's just something, kind of another factor to consider when you're thinking about those kinds of things.
Thanks, that's helpful.
Any other questions for Mr. Miller? Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Miller. And once again, we're looking forward to not seeing you, but it looks like we're going to have to see you another couple of times.
Fair enough.
Okay.
Have a good evening, everybody.
Thanks. Okay, next item is the ordinance on the Affordable Trust Fund. Mr. Aylesworth. Let's do an introduction. We've had a public hearing, and we need to decide what to do tonight. So let's give a brief introduction, and we'll figure it out.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I know this topic's garnered a fair amount of discussion spanning back to the last meeting, so I think in the interest of time, I'm actually just going to turn it over to our Director of Planning and Development, Linda Painter, for a quick broad brush strokes overview.
Welcome, Ms. Painter.
Good evening, everyone. So just for a brief recap of this, the proposed ordinance would establish a housing trust fund, and this is one of the recommendations that is included in the Affordable Housing Plan that both the Town Council and the Planning and Zoning Commission adopted earlier this summer. And in establishing the trust fund, it lays out the types of expenditures that funds could be used for, authorizes various sources of funding that could be used to essentially provide money to expend on different activities related to affordable housing. One of the things that I will note that's a little bit different about our ordinance, and this is something that the Ad Hoc Committee on Affordable and Workforce Housing really pushed for, was that if the town should reach essentially the state goal as established in statutes under 8-30G for a number of affordable housing units, that funds could also be expended for essentially support services for people who are eligible for affordable housing or living in affordable housing, so that we're really looking at something holistically and not just focusing on the affordable units. It does lay out a process for approving expenditures, and that authority would lie with you as the town council. And recommendations on requested expenditures or proposed expenditures would come from the Affordable Housing Committee that you created at your last meeting. And there would also be review and input from staff, including myself, as well as the Director of Finance. And the last piece that I'd like to highlight is that there would also be an annual report done every year to let you know what activities have taken place, as well as the financial status of the fund.
Thank you. Now, according to our rules, we can't adopt an ordinance immediately following a public hearing on that ordinance unless we move to suspend the rules, and that requires a larger than majority vote. So, under normal circumstances, we do this postponing if there has been some serious objection, and so far we have seen only endorsements for this plan. So we need to decide what to do. Mr. Shaken?
I move to suspend the rules to consider this ordinance this evening.
Is there a second? A second by Ms. Berthelot. Mr. Shaken, go ahead.
Just what you said. This is what we generally do if we don't have significant opposition, given that we're all returning counselors, and so we're here for the original discussion. I think it's appropriate to do so tonight.
All right, any further discussion of the motion to suspend the rules? All those in favor of suspending the rules, please raise your hand. I believe it is unanimous. Thank you. The rules have been suspended. We now proceed to vote on the ordinance itself. There is a motion. Okay, Ms. Berthelot.
Yes, I'd like to move to adopt the proposed Affordable Housing Trust Fund ordinance as Chapter 174 of the Mansfield Code of Ordinances. This ordinance shall be effective 21 days after publication in a newspaper having circulation within the town of Mansfield.
Is there a second? Seconded by Mr. Bruder. Discussion, Ms. Berthelot?
I'll speak in support to simply say that serving on the ad hoc committee was a terrific experience in working across the aisle, working on not in a partisan manner, but in a truly collaborative community manner. That was largely because of the leadership of Sam Bruder. And also I want to point out the wonderful support and just level of knowledge provided to us by Linda Painter and Jennifer Kaufman. They really helped us with this. I think this is an excellent ordinance, and it really will be the thing that makes affordable housing in our community possible. So I hope everybody will support it.
Anybody? Ron, Mr. Sharon. You're muted, Ron.
Apologize. I support the resolution and appreciate all the work that's gone into it. And forgive me if this is in the literature, but I've missed it. We've had discussion from time to time about the status of lowercase a affordable housing in the town. Non-deed restricted, but as of now falling within the numbers that would make something affordable. Where do we stand on that? You made an allusion to the possibility of some funds being used for such units. What's the kind of legal status of that, if it can be very quickly responded to?
Ms. Painter, can you answer that question?
So I believe what Councilor Shuren is referring to is what our consultant for the plan referred to is naturally occurring affordable units. So essentially, they meet from a price standpoint affordability concerns, but they are not considered affordable from a legal standpoint by the state. And the reason for that is because there's no control that would prevent the pricing, be it the sales price or the rental price, from being increased based on market pressures. So, you know, the good news is we have those units. The bad news is, from the state's perspective, we can't count them. The reference that I had provided earlier was that if we were to, right now, I'll call it a goal, for lack of a better word, in statutes, is that each community have at least 10% of their housing units be affordable. And that essentially, if you have 10%, you're exempted from what is known as the Affordable Housing Land Use Appeals, which really provides a lot of flexibility to developers of affordable housing. And there's limits what communities can do in review of those projects. The way the ordinance is drafted was to say that once we reach that threshold, whether it's the 10% that's today or if it's a different number in the future, then we could use these funds to support people who would be eligible to live in affordable housing, which then goes to your point of, you know, people who may be living in that naturally occurring affordable housing, even though it's not technically counted as an affordable housing unit under statute.
Does that satisfy your question, Mr. Shuren?
It does. I would just encourage anyone concerned with advocating at the state that they make such units eligible for support, and people living in such units more easily eligible for support.
Mr. Osberger, followed by Mr. Shaken.
Yeah, I would just like to mirror the sentiments that Terry Berthelot just brought up with regard to the ad hoc committee as a whole. It was run very well. There were no party lines. We rolled up our sleeves and we got the work done. And I'll have to say it was very rewarding working on that with no encumbrances, I'll say.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Shaken.
Thanks. And I'm supportive of this ordinance, and I want to get this fund up and running. I would say, I think, to build upon Ron's comments or Ron's question, that I think it would behoove us to, as this committee gets going and as this fund gets going, you know, we have a backlog of projects that would meet these 8-30G requirements, but I think concurrent to the establishment of this fund, the council needs to ask the Affordable Housing Committee to delve a little bit deeper into a policy question and a recommendation to us about where we ought to prioritize our resources in terms of the development of affordable housing, which is to say, is our goal to meet the statutory requirements of 8-30G, or is our goal to be to increase the availability of affordable housing, if those two things are not, in fact, always goals on the exact same track. And if it's the latter, would we in the future consider adjusting some of the spending parameters in this ordinance so that the town could make investments into the establishment of affordable housing or the rehabilitation of existing affordable housing, if that housing is, as Linda called it, naturally occurring rather than deed restricted? I think it's an interesting policy question. It's one that I understand the state's reasoning for not allowing that housing to be counted towards the community's total in the statute, but I think it's a separate policy question for us to consider as a council about how we think it would be best as a community to further affordable housing, and would require us to make some tough determinations and decisions about our ability to ever meet the threshold set out in 8-30G for percentage of deed restricted units in our community. So anyway, I don't want to do it tonight. I support it tonight, but I think it's something the council ought to consider asking this committee to look into from a policy perspective and make some recommendations to us about.
Any further, Mr. Bruder?
Just wanted to thank my colleagues for their support in this, and just to say that I too am supportive of this fund, and we are certainly looking, or this ordinance that establishes the fund, and that we are certainly looking for any and all residents who are interested in volunteering to please come and apply through the Committee on Committees to join the Permanent Affordable Housing Committee, so that we can make those, have them make the recommendations to the town council and start get going.
Thank you. I think I have a cat who's willing to volunteer. I just want to make a comment that this proposal came to us way back. The first discussion of it was introduced by Matt Hart in the year before he left, and the Affordable Housing Trust Fund was part of the Mansfield Tomorrow proposals. They're now about 5 years old. So this is the culmination of years of effort and long overdue. Is everybody ready to vote on this? Is there anybody all those in favor? This is important. Let's raise your hand. All those in favor, please raise your hands. All right, this is unanimous. We now have an ordinance which permits the establishment of an affordable housing trust fund. Anybody who wants to give us money to go into this is welcome to join us. Okay, thank you one and all. The next item on our agenda is resuming council and council committee in-person hearings. Mr. Aylesworth.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Don't necessarily have a lot to say on this topic. I think in some ways we were kind of talking about this, at least indirectly, during Rob's segment when we were talking about face masks. Just basically the question is what's the right timeline to consider making changes, in this case, potentially considering resuming in-person meetings. I had the opportunity to speak with both the mayor and deputy mayor on this topic last week. I got some feedback from them. Basically, in summary, I thought that the direction things were headed was that given that we are working to, as quickly as possible, implement a mandatory vaccination policy for all employees, as well as for some of the reasons that Mr. Miller laid out in terms of while the numbers are favorable and trending in a favorable direction, giving them more time to see exactly where things go, given that we're entering the holiday season and things may unfortunately go the other direction, that it seemed that targeting meetings directly after the first of the year, i.e. resuming in-person meetings in January, would be a sensible enough thing to plan on at this point, and obviously continue to evaluate as we get closer to that date. So that was a discussion I had with the mayor and deputy mayor, but it's the council's decision ultimately.
I would like to comment that this recommendation is more conservative than the recommendations in a number of towns. I think that Mansfield residents have been very appreciative of this conservative approach. I mean, there are obviously some problems, and there are times when everybody is frustrated and annoyed that their glass is getting fogged up and the masks being really annoying. But I think that this direction that we are recommending, that we stay conservative at least for a while, is one that I support. Mr. Osberger? You're muted, Sean.
I was just raising my hand, agreeing with the fogging of the mask, fogging the glasses mask thing.
And the colder it gets, the worse it's going to get. So
absolutely.
We have a motion on this, Mr. Shakin or Mr. Bruder? Mr. Bruder.
If there's no questions, I'd like to make the motion.
Please.
Move effective November 8th, 2021 to have the town council and council committees continue to utilize remote meetings until December 31st, 2021, and resume in-person meetings beginning on January 1st, 2022.
Ms. Berthelot seconds. Any further discussion?
Just,
Rudy, you want to speak to your motion?
thank you, Mayor. Just to reiterate some of the points that our esteemed town manager has made, in that, you know, while Mansfield is doing pretty well, you know, just given the change in the season and going back indoors, I think it's prudent for us for now to continue to meet virtually until you know, such time we can have a better idea of where COVID may bring us.
Mr. Shakin?
Thanks. So we did a couple of in-person meetings this summer before the Delta variant came, where we were under the impression that everyone on the town council and all the staff that were in front of us were vaccinated against COVID. And I think as long as that is the status of members of the council and of staff, that this plan makes sense. This gives people ample time to get boosted if they are eligible for a booster shot. And much more importantly, it gives time for those of us with young children to have their children be fully inoculated. If a child got a shot today, basically the first real day of widespread availability, they would be fully inoculated the week before Christmas. And so that's our next council meeting theoretically would fall at the first meeting in January, and that's when we would consider being back in person. I will say, I think it's a really good idea to continue the option for council committees to meet virtually or to meet in a hybrid way for both the council and committees, just for people who may not feel comfortable if there's going to be a meeting with a lot of, you know, where we anticipate a lot of members of the public attending. Unlike town staff, we obviously can't mandate vaccination for elected officials or for members of the public who wish to participate in our process in person, if we're in person. And also I will say that I think it's important, as folks have alluded to, that even though this is our plan, if this motion is adopted, that if things take a turn for the worse as they did last winter, obviously with a very different situation in terms of the population, we would reevaluate this decision at the beginning of January based on what we know about the public health at that time.
Any other comments or questions? Are we ready to vote? Is there anybody who's going to oppose this motion? Is there anybody who's going to abstain? Then I declare the motion to have been passed unanimously. Thank you. All right, the next item on the agenda is the proclamation in honor of Mansfield's veterans. There was a copy at the Veterans Day event. At one point the flowers tipped over and poured water all over it, so I'm not sure how many people actually saw it. But in any case, this is an opportunity to formally approve its issuance. The motion is on page 67. Is there somebody who would make this motion? Mr. Osberger?
Yes, Mayor, I would put that on. I move effective November 8th, 2021, to authorize the mayor to issue the attached proclamation in honor of Mansfield's veterans.
Do we have a second? Seconded by our one veteran, Ms. Berthelot. Thank you. Does anybody wish to oppose this motion? Does anybody wish to abstain? Then I declare that the motion has been adopted unanimously. The next item on our agenda is a presentation on Mansfield's complete streets, road projects, and safety. Mr. Aylesworth, you want to begin?
Yeah, and I'm going to turn things over to our DPW Director, John Carrington, in a moment, but just to kind of set the table here a little bit, as you all know, a few years ago, the town adopted, as many towns across the country have, a complete streets policy, basically signaling an intent to incorporate multimodal transportation strategies into future infrastructure projects. The idea being that roadways are not meant just for cars. They're meant for pedestrians and bicyclists and motorcyclists and lots of other folks. And so in more recent times, in the time that I've been here, I think of a couple instances dating back to the summer and earlier this fall. There have been some resident concerns and views expressed about the safety of some of our roads. And a lot of this gets at motor vehicle and pedestrian interactions, some of which are on our country roads. Chaffeeville Road is an example, as well as our downtown area. And so with that in mind, I thought this would be a good opportunity to bring in John and his team to talk a little bit about the town's Complete Streets policy, how we are currently thinking about Complete Streets principles when we plan road projects, and for frankly, give John and his team an opportunity to educate all of us about the various factors and considerations that go into planning for projects that would improve conditions for pedestrians and sort of non-motorists, if you will. So I thought we'd have give John and his team a chance to provide some food for thought, and then we can open it up for discussion and probably encourage discussion throughout. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to John.
Thank you, Ryan, and thank you, Council, and congratulations to all those that were reelected. Tonight, going to talk about complete streets and road resurfacing. As Ryan said, when we repave a road, some of the first complaints we get are from residents about why didn't you do this, or everybody's going faster now, and some of that I think is not quite true. It's a perception, and as council's aware, Mansfield's been around since 1702, and some of our roads have been around longer than that. So some of the widths and curves we inherited, we can't really get rid of without putting a lot of money into an effort to do that. And I don't know if the taxpayer wants to do that or is willing to pay for that. But tonight I'm joined with Brian Lavoie, the operations manager for Public Works, and my assistant town engineer, Derek Delay, and we'll give you a presentation. And this presentation won't address something that came up recently, Route 195 pedestrian issue that I know somebody came on a public comment about that, but the state is moving forward. We just found out that they are going to install some rectangular rapid flashing beacons. Those are similar to what's down by the bank on the 195 going south. So at some of those mid-block crossings in the future, I'm not sure exactly when that'll be installed, but in the coming year or two, we should see more controls to control safety for pedestrians crossing there. And moving to the next slide, as Ryan said, Complete Street policy has been around for a while. Actually passed when Maria was the interim town manager back in August of 2017. And the policy is to complement and enhance the surrounding land use and neighborhood character. It's to accommodate all users, so not just vehicles. We want to increase opportunities for bicycles and pedestrians. We want to make the environment safer for everyone using the roadway. And we have to be sensitive to, what our community looks like, what it can afford. And sometimes the policy says maintenance activities do not necessarily require us to consider complete streets consideration, but we tend to do that anyways. And next slide. The objectives of the good policy may be achieved by implementing just single elements into the project. You don't have to turn, we don't have to turn every road into a city street. There could be a series of improvements over the course of time, and we want to develop a major network level of improvement. So we want to work, what makes sense adding on to each other. Some of the concerns that we hear usually when we're paving, but we hear it other times, is concerns about safety for pedestrians and bicycles, the speeds of cars and trucks. Sometimes the width of the roads are too narrow. why didn't you widen the road? And we'll talk about that. We always hear, can I get a speed hump in front of my house? Those sometimes work, they don't always work. And we always hear that speeds increase after resurfacing. And I want to be up front. We used to call us in the Army, bottom line up front was how we wrote memorandum. Instead of writing something for 3 pages, we put the bottom line up front. The bottom line up front is the Department of Public Works can build whatever type of road the taxpayer wants to fund. So if we want a sidewalk, we want a bikeway, whatever we want, we can do. We just have to give you, and we are going to do that on Maple Road, but the cost is going to be about $3 million to go 1 mile. So we're going to go from the senior center down to just south of Max Felix Road, so not the complete way on Maple Road. And we're going to put in a bike lane, walk lane, similar to you see around Hunting Lodge Road, something like that. But it's not going to be cheap. And that, in this case, that we're getting all that money from the state, so it's good for the taxpayer. And why was Maple Road chosen? Why do we choose it? Well, it's got a good 50 to 60 foot right of way, as this picture depicts. So the right of way is what is basically town owned property. The town has a right of way through that 50 to 60 feet. So if you look at the bottom of the picture, the travel way is approximately 20 feet wide. So that means we got 10-foot lanes in both directions with 2-foot shoulders. So we have a 24-foot wide road. But with having a 50 to 60 foot right of way, we can put in a 10-foot multi-use trail. But you'll see inside that right of way, you're going to see trees. You may see stone walls, as depicted on the left side of the picture, or on the right side, you'll see mailboxes, utility poles. So those may have to be moved, or that land may have to be acquired. So it's not an easy task, but it can be done. The current practice when we go out to pave a road, we look at the council remembers in 2015 we did a pavement management study and report, which gave us pavement condition index numbers. That's a number from 0 to 100, which says how good the pavement is. 0 is basically a dirt road, that's turned to an unpaved road, and 100 is a freshly paved road. We also looked at the complete streets policy, and then we determined what type of rehabilitation we want to do. So we've been doing a lot of full depth reclamation. That's where we come out and basically rototill the road, turn the existing roadway into the roadway base, turn it into gravel. And that ranges, depending on the width of the road, anywhere from 300 to 400,000 miles per mile. Mill and overlay is when the pavement condition index is higher and there's not a lot of drainage to be done. We can mill off 2 inches of the road and put a new layer of asphalt on top of that, and that's roughly 150 to 250,000 per mile. An overlay, we just go out and put new pavement on the existing road. That's a cheaper fix, but it won't last as long as the other two up top. The full depth reclamation, we expect to get 25 to 30 years out of that road. Mill and overlay, 15 years. An overlay, we hope to get 10. Then we also do seals. We haven't done that lately, but we're looking at that in the future, where we do some type of seal to protect more like a neighborhood road that doesn't get as much traffic. And we do crack sealing to protect all our roads. Anywhere there's a crack, we want to seal that up so the water doesn't get in there and cause heaving and damage the road. Most of our roads have drainage issues. If we don't fix the drainage issues, we're basically, wasting our money putting down new pavement that's not going to last. We won't get 25 years out of a road if we don't fix the drainage. Unfortunately, most of the town drainage on the roads that were not recently paved is old and deteriorated. And major crossings of a road, crossing what you wouldn't think is a big river, it's just a stream, but those can range from 400,000 or higher. You think of Hillendale Road, most people probably didn't even know they were going across a quote unquote bridge, but that it does cost money. So with all that information, we then have to look at the right-of-way constraints. We can only operate within the town right-of-way. If we need to acquire property to make the road wider or to put in a bikeway, we may have to purchase or use eminent domain, which we all know in Connecticut, those two words aren't well received. And our road width, as I've said before, can range anywhere from 25 feet to 64 feet, and the majority are 33 feet wide. So that limits what we can do within the rebuilding without acquiring land. And for vehicles, they need a travel width of 18 to 22 feet wide, and having another 2 feet shoulder on each side makes that, the entire road has got to be 22 to 26 feet wide, depending on what we're working with. And again, most right-of-ways include trees and stone walls, and those have a cost to be removed. And if we remove those, do we want to lose our scenic quality or rural character to satisfy, the other forms of transportation? So this picture depicts what would be an ideal rural complete street. You basically have a 50 to 60 foot right of way. You get your 18 to 22 foot travel way with 2 to 6 foot shoulders. Most things are outside, your trees, your houses, stone walls are outside of the right of way, and just utility poles and mailboxes are probably within the right of way. That would be an ideal complete street. That would be easy to work with, easy to put in bike lanes, walkways, things of that nature. Unfortunately, that's not typical. This is a typical Mansfield right of way. It's 33 foot wide. There's going to be changes in elevation between the road and houses. So if we do anything where the tree and mailbox is on the left side, we have a problem with the driveway now getting to the house. And on the other side, there might be a guide rail that's already existing, utility poles and trees and stone walls. So just it limits what we can do without spending a lot of money and doing a major renovation. And here's some pictures just to show some things that you do encounter in Mansfield. This is Codfish Falls. This is right at the intersection with Gurleyville, looking to the north. And you can see that, this road came around in 1769. It's 2 rods wide, which is 33 feet. It's a scenic roadway. The surface you can drive on is approximately 18.5 feet wide. And if we had wanted to do anything to make that wider, we're going to have to acquire property outside. And you can see in this picture, you got a house right on the road. So where are you going to go on that side? The other side, you have a fence, there's trees. So anything we build, we have to put in retaining walls or guide rails, and those would have to be impact rated. So it's not going to be cheap. And what is it Codfish Falls going to look like after that? This is just another way of looking at that, existing 18.5 travel way. You got a stone wall and a utility pole 1.5 feet off that edge of the road, and then you have the house that's another 2.5 feet from there, from a stone wall. So it's just it's complicated. It's not as easy as it sounds. Moving further down, Codfish Falls, another example here, 21 foot wide travelway. It's a scenic roadway. We have Fisher Brook Crossing. It's 2 corrugated metal pipes, 36-inch. It's within the floodplain and wetland, and increasing the roadway width would require some way to store and mitigate the wetland. Chafeeville Road, this is what we just paved this past summer. This is towards the end with the Mulberry, just north of that intersection. And it's a 21 foot travelway here. The shoulders are 1 to 3 feet, depending. You can see the steep driveway on the right of the photo here. And right now, the owner has a pull-off at the bottom of the driveway. If we did anything to widen that road, we're making that even more difficult access for that homeowner. We still have to install a guide rail on the left side. We're having only basically one contractor, and he's been busy, so he hasn't been out, but he is coming to do that in. And then also to the left down there is the floodplain and river. So to go either way here to make this road wider, to accommodate, to make it safer for bikers and walkers. You know, you're talking retaining walls on both sides of the road. I haven't put a price on it, but it would be expensive. And you know, we did make this road safer. If we go back to that, Derek, I'm sorry. You know, the edges of these roads used to be cracked and, you know, kind of broken off and not as flat. So you're safer biking and walking on that road than you were a year ago. It's just, is it ideal what somebody would like to be, you know, 100% safe? No, but it is definitely better than it was. So here's back to Codfish Falls. This, I think people may be familiar with this curve where there's the ledge outcrop on the right, and we have 4 foot of unpaved shoulder, and then a drop off to a field. So you know, you could expand it to the left side of this photo, but then you would require a guide rail, and we could take out that rock too. You know, there's capability to blast out rock, but it's just, is that what we want to do? And we'd have to acquire the rights to property to do that. So just some examples. So with all that, how do we select the road to pave? You know, first we have to look at what we got budgeted. You know, the council has been very good with providing the department with a budget to address a lot of pavement and drainage. Our first priority has always been to stabilize the town's pavement condition index. We want to remain above 70. Our current focus has primarily been on collector roads, and those are the roads that bring people from neighborhoods to state arterial roads, like Route 6, 195, 275, 44, 89, and 32. If we're in the vicinity of a neighborhood road when we're doing those collector roads, we try to do that at the same time so we don't have to come back to the same location. The contractor only has to mobilize once. But we have done some neighborhood roads that were in very poor condition, like Hillendale Road. And, you know, a lot of it is drainage work. If we have a lot of drainage work, if we have to put in a major crossing, then, you know, that could take, if we're budgeted for 1.5 million for paving and drainage, and I have to use $500,000 just for drainage on one road, you know, I can limit what we do for the year. And like I said before, we are investigating the use of cape and slurry seals in neighborhood with good pavement conditions. Not chip seal, but similar to chip seal. And this depicts, you know, if we continue to resurface the way we've been going, approximately a $1 million budget for paving and some money for drainage, we can be on the green line, which would maintain our PCI at approximately 72. If we start going into right-of-way reconstruction, eating into that money, we see the PCI dipping below 70 because we're taking money that we could have been using for paving to use for other things to improve, you know, make it a wider road or add a biker trail. And here's some just examples from before. This is from when they did the report. There's 100. This is when Bassett's Bridge was paved and Mansfield City Road. So those were newly paved. Those were PCIs that's a very good road. Fair condition is these two, Derrick Drive and Stearns Road. And those are ones, if you could mill and overlay, you'd like to. Poor is, and these actually have both been repaved since these photos were taken, but Woodmont Drive and Mansfield City Road. And you can see here, there's a good picture of this shoulder with the cracking. That's the way Chafeeville looked on Mansfield City section here. So Chafeeville had that cracking, and, you know, it is tougher to ride a bike in those conditions or to walk and be a pedestrian. So when we do pave a road, even if we put back exactly what was there, we have made it safer for those individuals that are not in a vehicle. Then serious condition, here's a section of Bone Mill Road and Atwoodville Lane. Those are, they're not well-traveled roads, so we can get away with them being in poor condition, but we want to, someday you got to take care of these roads also. And we do have a plan. Here's a 5-year plan. I know it's hard to see, but the blue line shows roads that we would like to pave. Again, most of those are collectors, but there are some neighborhood roads in there. And the green shows grant funded. So you can see Maple Road right here. I don't know if you guys can see my cursor or not. Derek O'Brien, you got anything to say?
Well, I'm just going to use Chaffeeville as an example and elaborate to what you said, John. Had we widened it, we'd be encroaching on Army Corps' property. And I doubt very seriously they would allow us to further encroach anywhere near the Fenton River further than what we did and what was existing. So those are things that we have to take into account. The trees, it would just be, I don't think too many people would appreciate it if we started cutting trees, wiping them out 20 feet from the edge of the road and completely removing, because that's exactly what we would have to do. And I don't think most of the residents would appreciate that. The other thing is when we install sidewalks and bike paths, there's another element in the wintertime that most towns or cities, if you have a sidewalk in front of your house, you're responsible for it. Well, in the town of Mansfield, if the sidewalk was put in by us or the bikeway, that is our responsibility to keep it clear during the wintertime. That's a whole nother, every time we add more to that just adds more work in the wintertime to clean them up. And so, I get it. When you're walking down these rural roads, yeah, people do fly down the road. I walk down the roads all the time that are probably even narrower than some of the ones we do. It's a tough decision to make. In price is one thing, but taking away the rural characteristic is another thing. So that's all I have to add.
All right, thanks, Brian. We'll move to the next slide, Derek, unless you had something to say, Derek.
Derek, you're muted.
Sorry about that. No, I think you, both Brian and John, really hit on the high points that, you're definitely doing a balancing act of a lot of different components. And obviously, receiving the public input and understanding what some of the concerns are as citizens is always incredibly helpful as we start to do those balancing acts. We do appreciate that feedback.
And speaking of feedback, we do get feedback from our speeds after resurfacing. So here are some examples. Pleasant Valley, the speed limit's 30 miles per hour. We did a speed study in 2013. The average speed was 35 miles per hour. And after paving it in 2020, the speed in 2021 was 33 miles per hour. And then the feedback is we put up the electronic signs. The Yukon T2 Center gave us two those signs that they tell you your speed right as you're driving by, and putting that one up is actually, you can see, taking the speed down. So we may look at trying to purchase more of those. They're roughly $2,000 a piece, but those seem to be working as far as one way of getting the speed down. Hillendale Road, did a study a while back, so 14 years ago, the average speed was 31 miles, and post paving it last year. This year, the speed was 32 miles per hour. So, not much change. And we're going to move one of those feedback. We have two of them, move one of them to Hillendale to get some study there. Eastwood Road, 2006 with speed humps. The average speed was 30 miles per hour. In 2019, we narrowed the roadway, put in a sidewalk, and the average speed has jumped up there 4 miles per hour without the speed humps. We may look at a feedback sign there to see what that does. Next slide, Derek. The slide here basically reveals some things that are kind of eye-opening. First, the speeds on the left, hitting somebody at 23 miles per hour, while not a good thing, is a lot better than hitting somebody at 32, 42, 50, or 58. As you see, the percentage of risk of death goes up drastically. So we want to keep people slow. That's on the right is basically something that depicts that this is not just a public works problem. This is an everybody problem. It takes a village. Everybody has a role in using roads and being safe. So it's the safe system approach where you have to have safe road users. So, if you're driving a vehicle, how fast you're going, you need to go the posted speed limit. I think everyone knows, that the speed limits are either 25 or 30 miles per hour on all town roads that are owned by the town. The state roads may have a little faster. We can provide the safe roads. The people that are walking and biking, they have to be aware. And basically it's just everybody has a responsibility. And it basically, as it says over there around the top right of the circle, humans make mistakes. So everybody makes a mistake driving. Somebody goes faster than they should. Somebody does something they shouldn't do when they're walking or biking. Things happen. So we have to be aware of that. Everybody has to be looking out, and somebody getting hurt or killed is just unacceptable. So we have to just be proactive. And how can we slow down traffic? Again, like I said, this can't be all public works. Police enforcement, I know we have the state troopers, but we used to have, Will Beagle was the last constable we had, and that's probably the last time that the ticket was written on a town road was when Will was here. I'm not sure if the state troopers have been out to ticket too many people on town roads. They might have on state roads, but just police enforcement would help. The instant feedback signs have helped. If we can get more of those, I think that would help around town. But they do realize after they're up for a while that people start to ignore them like they ignore all other signs. So you have to move them around and keep people alert. We do evaluate for speed humps. There was a policy adopted that hasn't changed in 20 years or so. And we can look at additional traffic calming measures, or we have the funding and, makes sense. And we need to educate people. It's not, everybody has a responsibility. That chart that I just showed, we have to make sure people understand their responsibility. Can't blame it on all on the drivers. You have to, everybody has to know what they're doing. And other things we have to consider whenever we're paving, and some of the costs is do we need curbing, driveway aprons? We have to replace those and make sure they're good. There could be a sidewalk already when we're paving a road. The signs, we have to replace the sign. You got a new road, you don't want to have old signs. So if the signs are very old, we replace them. We have to stripe them. If we need lights, guide rail, move utilities, those are all things that come into consideration when paving a road. And some potential future plans with complete streets, address Maple Road, where we're going to connect basically what's around Separatist and 275 to Maple Road and get that all down to the middle school complex. We'd like to look at, the Gurleyville Road area to tie that in. Mansfield Center, we'd like to get, where people could go from the Mansfield Center sidewalks down Bassett's Bridge to Mansfield Hollow. And in southern Mansfield, basically there's a loop around Connetville, Put in Lane, Meadowbrook Road, and Mansfield City Road, try to connect all that loop. So, those are areas where we see, people would be walking, using the road if we can address those areas. And, because currently most of our complete streets or close to complete streets are around the campus, and we need to, start looking elsewhere. Not sure we can do it everywhere in town, but these are 4 areas I think, it'd be a good place to look. And time for discussion.
Mr. Shuren, followed by Mr. Bruder, followed by Mr. Shaken.
Thank you, John. This is a very complete report. Just a few small points. One, it's not for the council to get into specific details of where and when a sidewalk should go, but it is for people with expertise to discuss before the fact. And one of my concerns has been that we have 2 bodies that have the kind of title of traffic in their title. One is the Traffic Authority, which consists of town and other employees, including from the state trooper, and the other is the Transportation Committee. And you and I have had indirect communication about this, John, today.
Yes.
I would very much like it if somebody were appointed to one of those bodies who had some degree of expertise from the pedestrian or bicyclist's point of view, so that in the preliminary discussions, that would be part of the discussion. I know that after, or even as decisions are made, you go out to the public, but I'd like that to begin at the early level with people who are part of the group making the decisions. Second, you may remember 6 or 7 years ago in my own street, we met with the Traffic Authority and we were concerned about traffic and talked about many options. Some we rejected and others we rejected. And then we came up with a kind of outside the box resolution that involved signage, and everybody was happy. It was a very good example of how the process could work with a lot of discussion. And with that, I just want to commend your work, but urge that in the future years, as things proceed, there be people with relevant interest and expertise involved at the ground level in discussion and consideration.
Mr. Shuren, I just want to comment that the chair of the Transportation Committee is Lon Hultgren, who is one of the primary moving advocates for bike riding and pedestrians and complete streets, I believe, in town. And former Public Works Director, one of the criticisms he faced was too much concern for bike riders and pedestrians.
Well, let him continue.
Well, that's where he seems to be the chair, according to the website. So I think you do have an advocate there. And I can't remember who I called on to be second. I know Mr. Shaken was third. Was Mr. Bruder? I had thought that might be true. Go ahead.
If not, I'll take it. But thank you, Mayor. And thank you, John, for the presentation tonight. It sounds like a lot of thought and planning has gone into making sure that our roads are safe. And as somebody who has been on some of these roads after they've been redone by the town, I have to say thank you, because they are safer, including the edges, as you pointed out. And it sounds like, my question was really focused on these next projects that you have at the end of the slides. I think it was scrolling to it in the packet, the Maple Road and other areas that could be identified, Gurleyville Road, Mansfield Center area. These are locations that you're looking at to adding like a bike lane or some sort of additional pedestrian walkway in addition to the repaving and drainage?
Yes, we think the opportunity is there. I mean, it's not a done deal by any means. We'd have to toss it out, get council approval as far as funding, and to go back to Ron's thing. Transportation Advisory Committee should do something, but we the department does not go to Transportation Advisory Committee and say, these are the roads we're going to pave next year. What do you think? That's what they need to get that charge from the council. I kind of asked that when I first got here, like 2014, 2015, if they wanted to review, the roads we were going to pave. Because it's not fair to me as director and, Brian and Derek that, well, you guys decide which roads. How do you do that? It'd be nice to have a more collaborative, input, because somebody will say that I paved this road because I know somebody lives on that road, or I paved Mansfield City Road because the mayor lives on Mansfield City Road, and that's not the case. But it'd be nice to have a little more input from a committee. So if the Transportation Advisory Committee, and I'm not sure if they want it, but if they could be given that charge to review, the upcoming paving for the year, I think that might help.
Yeah, and I think Ryan, if it's not already a charge for the Transportation Committee, maybe that's something that the Committee on Committees can take a look at. Given I would imagine that, or what I'm interpreting from my colleagues as support for being part of that planning process for when paving's happening, to have that recommendation or that advisory of, you're doing this area. I like the areas that you've identified, John, specifically the Mansfield Center and Southern Mansfield, just myself being more familiar with that. But that's something that the Transportation Committee can certainly, I'm sure, have a hand in.
Mr. Shaken, followed by Ms. Berthelot.
Thanks, Mayor. John, thanks for the presentation. I think it's very helpful to understand some of the restrictions of just the physical space of our roads and how difficult it makes a sort of true gold standard complete streets across the entirety of town. Sort of to that end, you sort of touched on a little bit at the end of your presentation some of the two speed limit flashing signs that we've installed, and how one of them at least seems to have had some effect. It strikes me that the sidewalk or the bikeway that you outlined on Maple Road, and similar to the one on Hunting Lodge Road, I would, to use this metaphor, call that the sort of Cadillac Escalade of complete street, right? Like it's a whole separate road. It's wide enough for a small car. It's totally separated in many respects from the side of the road, different even than a sidewalk. It'd be very difficult for there to be a pedestrian versus car accident on one of those pathways, which is sort of off of the road. But and clearly there's no possible scenario under which we could add a similar feature to all of the town's sort of main town roads. It would be wildly cost prohibitive. It would completely change the nature of hundreds of taxpayers' properties and the roads themselves. Even if the topography allowed for it, which I don't think it does in many cases, especially along the Fenton River. But I'm wondering if there's the sort of Chevy Silverado of complete streets that we could consider putting onto some of these roads. And I might be crazy, but I seem to recall growing up as a kid that there were, even though maybe they weren't in conformance with the exact standards of road width, there were sort of white, very thin and narrow, but nevertheless white shoulder lines painted on the sides of our main roads to give someone a place to walk or try to ride a bike. And I'm wondering if there's things like that we could do that might have an effect of slowing traffic, or at least having drivers stay off of the shoulders a little bit more, that might have an impact. Or if there's other things, like I noticed in some places there's, I think Mansfield City, parts of it have this, there's the sort of vibrating things in the center line. So if you cross over to the center line as you're driving quickly across lanes of traffic, you get a little vibration in your tires and slows you down to stay on your side of the street. I'm wondering if there's other things like that we could do that would not cost $2 million per mile that might have an effect on pedestrian safety on some of our other roads.
I think the white line we can easily paint those. They may not leave much on the other side, but at least it narrows the lane, which I think slows down traffic. Even though Eastwood, we did paint a white line, and the traffic speed did go up, but it could be a
speed bumps out.
Yeah, could be. Yeah.
And then my other question is, we have all these roads now, right? And so I agree, Chafeeville is a much safer road to drive and walk on. Now I live off of Chafeeville, so I've watched and driven the paving daily. But it feels wider than it was before because the sides of the road aren't cracked into nothing. So when you drive it, you feel like you've got a little bit more space to play with. So I think narrowing is a great idea, but I'm wondering if there's, since you're sort of running, so you're collecting some of the data on the impact of these signs, if it would make sense to try a couple things out in different places and see if we're having an impact. So try one mitigation method on this road, try another one on the other road, and we could get to a place where we have a sort of MO of things that we do whenever we pave a road that we know has some sort of impact, and that could be sort of what we build into what we do in the future. To me, at least, that's how we could live a little bit more true to the complete street promise that we've made without spending $2.5 million per mile to build a 10-foot wide bike path.
Good points. The rubble strips down the middle, I'm not sure if it's not on any town road, it's a state road you probably saw those on, but I don't know if there's a speed requirement for those, and I don't know what that does. You know, I'm a little leery of marking up my road with that, even though the state does it, but they got wider roads. We'll investigate that.
Thanks.
I think the white line adds something else, and that is on dark, foggy nights, it keeps cars from going off the road. I mean, a lot of us have commented on how helpful they are for drivers as well as to protect people who might be walking on the other side of Ms. Berthoud, did you have your hand up?
I did, thank you. First off, thank you, John, for an excellent presentation, and you certainly make it clear the challenges of addressing the problem of people speeding and how unsafe it makes it for our community members. And I just want to weigh in and say that I think this is a really important issue, and that right now people are driving less safely than they ever had before for a multiple of reasons, and that making our streets less safe than they were in the past. And that for those of us who moved to Mansfield because of how beautiful the roads are, and they truly are, it's not necessarily that I would ever want to see wide city-like roads, boulevards at all, and I really don't want that, but it does seem like there needs to be a community effort outside of public works. This is what we were getting at before, to figure out ways of slowing people down so that everybody's safe. I would do think that the people who are speeding are ripping the fabric of our community. One of my favorite things is walking on the roads and seeing my neighbors and talking to the kids and their dogs. And when you can't do that, it really ruins neighborhoods. So I guess I want to echo the idea of getting the transportation committee more involved. And as Sam said earlier, we're looking at the charges of the various committees and sort of having this maybe as more of their charge, so that they're working not only with Public Works, but maybe with bigger picture to address a way of making our roads more safe, not just in terms of the roads being safe, but in the way that people drive and recognizing that they're in neighborhoods and they need to drive safely. And it might be that we need another committee entirely, I don't know, but it certainly makes sense to start with the Transportation Committee. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr. Osberger.
Yes, Mr. Carrington, that was a very thorough and very informative presentation. And I would share in the sentiments, and I appreciate your perception on how much do we go before we take away from the rural character of the roads. Mansfield has been known for years for its character and how the roads are. And I do appreciate that you take that in consideration. Thank you.
Anybody else? Mr.
Madam
Ailes?
Mayor, I just wanted to thank the council for the feedback that they've provided. I think we all share the same set of goals here. And obviously there's a lot of devil in the proverbial devil in the details. And we look forward to working through a lot of these items and finding ways to, better engage and sort of on a sustained basis engage the many different constituencies in our public that utilize our roads to inform our decision making.
I have a question. Everybody feels afraid, and I certainly do. I mean, Mansfield City Road has been improved, and I still don't feel entirely comfortable walking on it because, as everybody knows, it's one of the roads that people drive faster on. Have there been any actual injuries or deaths of pedestrians on our roads within the past years? Does anybody have any idea?
I'm not aware of any. But Tarek, do you know?
It's just I can get in the chat. There was a cyclist that was hit on Maple Road that kind of pushed that project forward. But as far as pedestrians, no, we're not aware of one on a town road.
Okay. Yeah, I think that people are afraid enough so that they're avoiding walking where they might actually be safe because of the speed of traffic and the lack of barrier of any sort between a pedestrian or a biker and a car. I'm not sure. I have no suggestions for solving it. I certainly wouldn't advocate, widening the roads and taking out the trees and the ledges and all of that. It would turn us into a suburb for sure. Okay, are there any further questions for Public Works? All right, well, thank you once again, John, and for your team. This is very useful, very helpful. I really like the diagrams in particular. They illustrate your point in ways that that words don't often do. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right, and the next item on our agenda is the municipal employee vaccination policy. Mr. Aylesworth, this is your baby.
My baby. Thank you for that. Yeah, so the town council, as you all know, because you all participated in the last meeting, the October 25th meeting, sent a pretty clear directive, policy preference, if you will, or mandate, if you will, that you'd like to see the town adopt a vaccination mandate for its employees. And then subsequent to that, there was a personnel committee meeting a week ago on Monday, November 1st, where we had an opportunity, Holly Schaefer, myself, Director of Human Resources, and myself had an opportunity to walk the personnel committee through sort of the key components of the policy and also provide the personnel committee an opportunity to talk directly with attorney Ken Weinstock, the town's labor attorney, on various aspects of this that have labor implications, which are quite a few. And then subsequent to all that, while staff and I were busy developing the draft policy that has been included in your packet for review in anticipation of some discussion tonight, the much anticipated emergency temporary standard, ETS for short, that we anticipated OSHA would be coming out with, quote unquote, any day now, dropped last week. And so that's about a 500-page document, an interim federal rule that we've had to try to unpack and reconcile with our policy and see to what extent some changes were required, either broad brush or more fine tooth comb in our policy. And we still are continuing to do that. I think by and large, the policy, certainly its broad intent and some of the foundational aspects of it that you see in your packet, I don't think would be changing at this point an awful lot in response to the ETS that was issued. And I don't think tonight we really want to get into a group edit situation because there was consensus or shared understanding that administrative policy such as this is developed and implemented at my level, at the staff level, but we did get a lot of useful feedback, which I very much appreciate the guidance that the Personnel Committee provided last week. But as promised, based on the motion you guys made on October 25th, you wanted to see a draft policy by this meeting. That has been provided in the packet. We're trying to get this finalized as soon as possible so that it can be shared with our bargaining units. And, again, while we shouldn't get into too many of the finer details as far as labor considerations is concerned, Attorney Weinstock is here tonight. And if there are sort of basic clarifying questions that you want to pose about how certain things might be administered, he is here as a reference as well. So that's kind of the overview.
There is no motion on this. This is an overview of the policy. Mr. Shaken.
Hi. I just have a question on page 108. There's reference to testing of unvaccinated employees and the town's obligation or offering to pay for those costs. Without getting into details of negotiations, I'm aware that the OSHA standards that were released last week explicitly do not require employers to pick up any of the costs associated with testing or masking, the testing or masking that is mandated in workplaces of more than 100 employees for unvaccinated staff. And so I'm wondering about that provision in our policy.
That is an area that we're continuing to look at. I think what I'll say in a public forum now, because it might have implications again in terms of where our discussions go from this point forward with the unions, that there are, I don't have the document in front of me, but you are correct that is what the ETS says. However, there's a provision in there or provisions in the ETS that allude to how it would not override requirements as imposed by any existing collective bargaining agreements. And so we're having discussions with Ken, with our labor council now, about requirements that are laid out in our existing CBAs and whether or not existing requirements for employee testing or workplace environment safety or any combination of things collectively or individually rise to the level of saying, this is analogous to testing for COVID-19 and would therefore be a responsibility of the employer versus the employee. But this, I think it might have even been highlighted in your packet. And that's because this is something that is not settled yet. We're continuing to look at. But Attorney Weinstock, if you're there, feel free to chime in whatever level of detail you feel appropriate.
Welcome, Mr. Weinstock.
Yeah, I think that Ryan summarized it really well, given his caveat about, to the extent of discussing this in a public forum, that there are some labor relations and negotiation strategy issues that would be involved to have a more in-depth discussion about it. So I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable doing that in an open meeting setting.
And if I could ask an unrelated follow-up, I think broadly with that one sort of concern, I think this is a good policy and it matches what we've been asking of our school employees, and it matches what OSHA is asking of pretty much every employee or the vast majority of employees in the United States. And so it's a minimum standard for what we ought to expect for our town employees, for folks who are interacting with the public especially, or for folks whose interaction with each other, on whose interaction with each other rests the public safety, right? And so I think it's a good step, and I'm very appreciative of Ken, Ryan, Holly, all of your work on this in relatively short order. Ryan, I was wondering if you or Holly would be able to just sort of give us and the public a sense of where we're at in terms of town staff vaccination rates. And I know you had asked for folks to provide that information with you and where we're at with how many folks have provided it. And so give us a sense of what we would expect to see in terms of how many people would need to come into compliance with this policy by December 6th.
I want to interrupt just in a moment. Does anybody know who CBH is on the phone?
I think that's Charmaine Bradshaw Hill.
Ah, good.
Yes,
Okay.
that's Charmaine on her cell phone.
Thanks, Charmaine. All right, go ahead.
So with respect to our full-time employees, of which there are 121, I think at last report to you all, the breakdown was provided that, there were a relatively large number of employees that we didn't have a response from yet at that point to the survey, when we weren't sure how to interpret that, whether that meant they weren't vaccinated or they just hadn't provided the information yet. I believe perhaps 3 of those folks did ultimately provide documentation to show that they're vaccinated. So I think that collectively had the effect of bringing our totals above 80%. We might be at something like 81% vaccinated amongst our permanent and full-time employees. And as we discussed previously, the largest sort of group of folks that's hardest to get accurate and reliable data for are our part-time employees, because in particular the community center has such a large network of very, very part-time folks for which it's frankly not easy to get in contact with, because we don't even necessarily have a town email address attached to those people. And so Holly, I know, has been working very closely with Jay O'Keefe, the interim director of Parks and Rec, to try to reach those folks to make sure that they're aware of the request to provide information on their vaccination status. So Holly, if you're there, I guess I'd turn over to you. I don't know if there's anything, kind of population scale level updates you can provide at this point.
Yeah, and that's true. I reached out to Jay last week because it is the majority of over about 120 part-time Parks and Rec staff who don't have town email addresses. His recommendation, and I engaged him and his full-time staff to urge return of the form that we sent out in October. But the way they communicate mostly is through the individual's Gmail account, their personal email account. But he said that can be sketchy as well, short of sending out text messages, which he said is the best way to reach the 20-somethings, the teens. The thought was, setting up sort of a personal kiosk with people when they come into work and get the form back from them that way. I can tell you, in looking at all of our full-time, part-time volunteers, interns, it's a total of 353 surveys that we were looking for to get returned. As of last Monday, we had 207 returned, 59% of the population that we were trying to survey had returned. And of the forms that we did get returned, 88.4% of the staff are vaccinated.
If I could just ask a follow-up for our full-time, I understand there's a pretty large population of folks who are volunteer or part-time, especially in Parks and Rec and in the fire department. But for our full-time staff, what has been the response rate and what's been the vaccination and the corresponding vaccination rate?
So as Ryan mentioned, we have 121 full-time staff. Of that, 97 are vaccinated.
Thanks. That's helpful. I wonder if as we move forward with this policy, I appreciate that it's touchy subject because there's many fewer employees for the town than for the state, but I know the governor put out sort of department by department data as the policy went into effect. It might be helpful just to have a running sort of tally going, not necessarily department by department, but of how things are going in terms of compliance with the policy and vaccination rates as we sort of go into the first few months of the policy going into effect. But we'll leave that for a later date. And I again say I think the policy looks very good, and thank you for the work on putting it together.
Anybody else on the topic? All right, I guess we wait and see what transpires as we go forward. The number of unvaccinated people is still concerning from my perspective, and this will not be easy. So I hope that we can find a way through this that is not terribly disruptive, but also protects all of our citizens, whether they work for the town or they interact with the town, or they have family or friends who do. And you know, the contagiousness of this new variant is really frightening. The next item on our agenda are reports of council committees. I know Finance Committee has met this evening. So do you have a report, Peter?
I do, Mayor. Thank you. We did have a meeting today, right, as you noted, right before the town council meeting, the swearing in. And the report we heard from Rochelle Lambert, who I see as the new town assessor in the sense that she's only been here a year. But this, for many of us, including myself, this is the first time to actually be able to talk to her. So we appreciated her time. And Rochelle walked us through both the reevaluation process and both from the timing, which next reevaluation, which is mandated by state law, it will likely be October 2024. And then also commented on what the major focus or purpose of the valuation and the work of her office in general is the fair and equitable evaluation and taxation. The valuation, of course, leads directly to property taxes and other important auto taxes, and the importance of doing it right out of fairness for all taxpayers in Mansfield. There was no action taken. It was an informative presentation, but no action was needed.
Thank you. Any questions for Mr. Kotchenberger? Personnel?
I would say Mr. Aylesworth really summarized our last personnel committee meeting in the sense that Attorney Weinstock was kind enough to join us, walk us through some of the concerns and essentially what we've heard this evening. So thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Ms. Berthelot? Committee on Committees, Mr. Bruder.
Yes, we met this past Thursday, and our recommendations will be forwarded to the next town council meeting in 2 weeks. There just wasn't enough time for notification purposes. And I just wanted to highlight that we continue to get great volunteers from our residents, and including a high school student who is joining the Human Rights Commission, or being recommended to join, and once approved by the town council would be such.
Thank you. Do you have a report from Ad Hoc Housing Committee?
No, the work for the Ad Hoc Committee is really wrapped up now that we have the Housing Trust Fund, and the next step is to get members on the permanent affordable housing committee, and start making recommendations to us.
Okay. The next item is departmental and advisory committee reports. Any questions on those? Any comments on petitions, requests, and communications? Any requests for future agendas? All right. The next item is a motion to adjourn. However, I want to remind everybody that there will be a non-noticed meeting for members of the council following this meeting. It is not a formal council meeting because it's strategy and negotiations with respect to collective bargaining. And Mr. Aylesworth and Mr. Weinstock will be joining us. So is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Moved by Mr. Shaken. Is there a second? Mr. Bruder. All those in favor of adjourning? Is there anybody opposed to adjourning? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you very much. I'd like to thank Mr. Lindsay for joining us. And we are now adjourned.
Madam Mayor, will Ms. Schaefer be invited into
the... yes, of course, of course.
Okay. All right, I'll release everyone else and stop the recording.
Thank you.
And pass it over to Ryan.
Recording stopped.
Tasha, Ken is coming too.
Yes, I'll leave Ken in and Holly.
Ken and Holly and myself would be the only non-council members here.
Yes, so I'll release Mr. Lindsay. Okay. Ryan, I made you the host.
Okay, great.
Mr. Lindsay, you need to leave the meeting. Thank you. Thank you.
And live stream, IT, you can leave too because this isn't recorded. Oh, no, you have to stay on so they can stay in the meeting. Okay.
So I'm leaving live stream on. It's not being recorded, but leaving them on. Is that
right? It's not being recorded, but I think he has to stay in. No, he doesn't have to stay in, so the Zoom can keep running.
Yeah, all right.
So he can go. Okay, I'm
but
leaving now.
We're not streaming.
No, he's just